ethical consideration, security consideration when we talk about artificial intelligence and do's and don'ts. Michael Stern, shareholder in Greenwood, United States. Juan Manuel Contreras, co-founder and CEO of AYMARA, United States. MC Eric ZARAKOV, Vice President of PARAVISION, United States.
Good morning. So let's jump right in. I'd like to set some context for this session on ethical and safety considerations in AI. And I thought I would start off with a personal story of my most recent experiences with machine learning in AI, because I think the personal experiences help you remember and embody what's going on in our industry right now. And it was these experiences that woke me up to the speed of development that's going on in our industry. Yes, avanza, no? Yeah. So I'm curious, my first experience recently was with ChatGPT, and I'm curious if it could raise hands, how many have used directly ChatGPT? So some, not all. So I really encourage it because it's a fascinating experience. And so my first experience was I opened up a chat window and I typed in a question. And the question I typed in was explain virtual reality. And it was in common language. It responded right away in the discourse language. I was blown away actually because I could just free-form my question and it came back a very conversational response. And then about a month ago, they did an upgrade and I decided to try again, but this time with using voice. And so what I did here, but we're not hearing, is I said, in my voice, I said, explain virtual reality, and it responded, in again, a very conversational tone. And I was blown away at the speed of which how things have started to change. And so with that as a backdrop, then the third experience I had recently was I was in San Francisco, and I decided to catch a taxi, and it was a Waymo taxi, one of these driverless taxis, and this was the experience that I had. Now you may have seen videos of this, but it's really kind of strange to be getting into a car when there's no driver, and you've just typed in your address, and it's navigating on its own, seeing people come in front of it and cars in front of it. And so I went from these questions about virtual reality to having this experience that the real world was changing around me directly in the true reality. And so the deployment of these technologies is really massive and pervasive. I've worked in Silicon Valley for over 40 years. I've seen waves of innovations, some of which are particularly strong inflection points, from development of the personal computer to the iPhone to the World Wide Web. And there are certain times when there's an inflection point that dramatically affects society. And this is one of those times where it's going to touch pretty much all industries and markets in one way or the other. Whether it's in healthcare for diagnostics and treatments, self-driving cars, customer service and marketing, they're all being impacted in one way or the other. And at the same time, for this community, the issues are sometimes familiar. There's still issues about liability, IP ownership, privacy, ethics, diversity, and they're going to affect in similar ways and sometimes in different ways, but also at a very fast rate of change. In the midst of these changes, there is an urgency for guide rails on development, on usage, on policy, and regulation. The technology is being developed at a pace that is outpacing oversight and best practices. The impact of these are becoming very real and increasingly affecting our daily lives, our professions, our business, and society. And like other panelists here, I am from the tech industry, where we are collectively developing these technologies and deploying these core technologies that we're discussing in this forum. And as I was listening throughout the past day and this morning, it occurred to me that a lot of what's talked about in these sessions is about, from the point of view of the industry developing technology and the guidance and regulations around them. But I thought to myself, if I was sitting in the audience, there's a question that would really come poised to my mind. And that question is, why should you care? We're talking about things that are happening in Silicon Valley and in New York, but why should you care and why should your clients care? I think there can be an easy tendency to feel like these things and topics are happening elsewhere. But international companies are engaged in Latin America. European countries, companies are engaged in Latin America. And they are operating under guidance of developing of ethics and safety guidelines that will cascade and come to here. The speed of things happening, I cannot underestimate. As a quick side note, I think yesterday there was a gentleman on the panel that talked about Kodak and how Kodak very quickly imploded in the change from film to digital technology. I was fortunate to have, or unfortunate, to have a front seat experience there. I worked at Apple, and one of my jobs at Apple was to be the corporate liaison between Apple and Kodak. And so I saw the technology that Kodak had. I saw their ability to deploy some very, very interesting technology, but they were focusing on short-term issues, how to protect their business, and had an attitude that they could control the industry at large, and you can't do that. The pace of development is just much too fast. And so when I step back and look at the pace of things here, I was trying to think, well, what's a good analogy to think about as we set the stage for the panelists? And for some reason this morning, I woke up and I thought surfing came to mind. And the thinking that I have is that we're on this ocean together, and these waves of AI technologies are coming. And you can see some big waves coming off in the distance. They're unpredictable, they're getting larger. And so we have choices in that, what do we do when the waves come? We can decide to float and see what happens as the waves pass over. We can duck under the wave and hope it passes over us and not really deal with it for a little bit. Or we can decide to learn how to surf. And so when you start to surf, it's a bit scary. You step on a surfboard, you're unbalanced, but the point is to get on the journey, and then to surround yourselves with other surfers who you can learn from, that know the rocks, that know the climate, that know the waves, and they've seen the weather. And so this morning, using that same analogy, we've got two surfers here from different backgrounds. Michael BURSHTEYN is a technology lawyer from San Francisco who handles worldwide AI regulations in compliance, safety, and litigation matters. He was also a co-founder in a startup in Silicon Valley. And so he's going to cover what I've called the consequences of the AI Wild West. And by that, I mean he's going to get into some real-world examples of litigations, of impact of misuse, misinformation, fraud, and really get into the heart of the matter to give you some relationship of some of the things that he's seeing. And that'll be followed by Juan Manuel. Juan Manuel has a PhD in neuroscience from Harvard. Kind of intimidating to be on the same stage with that. He has spent over a decade working in AI, has led applied science team from Uber that was really working on the cross-section of AI law and compliance. And now he's a co-founder and CEO of AYMARA, which is a startup building tools to make generative AI safe. And so what he'll be talking about is aligning the objectives and ethics of a company and how to take that methodology for aligning the usage and the importance of the commitment to ongoing processes, because once you step onto this path, you really need to stay on it. It's not like you step onto it and then you're out. This is going to be an ongoing part of our lives. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michael.
Thanks, Eric. Awesome. So we're going to start with just going through, on the legal side, some concrete examples and ways that AI safety can impact liability, claims from individuals, businesses, and regulators. And before we get into the legal side, it's a question about ethics. And to Eric's point, why should we care about ethics? You know, one is just kind of the basic idea. If you're developing a product or building a business, your orientation ethically may matter, right? You may think about, we want to do things out in the world the way we would want our business partners to do things. If we're living in a supply chain where we have to rely on other components, whether those are cloud environments or data centers or APIs, how are those businesses building those things and what's their ethical orientation? We want to be part of an aligned community. Another issue is there just isn't a lot of law on this. The regulations are still emerging. Even in Europe, which is usually a leader, we're years away from a real AI regulatory regime. In the United States, some of the agencies, and we'll get into it, have started doing things, but you've got maybe 1, 2, 3 examples, a few states. In Latin America, we'll go over that briefly. There's some proposed legislation, but nothing has passed yet. And then lastly, ethics is an opportunity. And so we talked about this a bit yesterday, and it's been a theme throughout, but you can differentiate, your clients can differentiate on safety as something that they can actually use to sell. So moving to safety, why does that matter? And this is kind of a roadmap for how I'm going to go through this. First is, what happens if the AI product that is being adopted, whether that's in retail, customer facing, or internally in a business to help your engineers code or to help your business people create PowerPoint decks or whatever it may be, what happens if things are wrong or inaccurate? We'll go through different types of claims here: deceptive conduct, harm, product liability type theories, defamation, which has been a theme throughout the conference. We'll talk about some of the emerging regulatory regimes. We'll briefly see what's going on in Latin America. And finally, we'll talk about examples of platform abuse and how, you know, nefarious and malicious actors are going to try to, you know, mess with things. So in terms of the types of claims when an answer is wrong or inaccurate, you ask the AI, how do I fix my washing machine? How do I fix my car? Or I just need a solution for something, right? If the output doesn't match the advertising, if you look in the United States, for example, every state has some sort of consumer protection law that either the attorney general of that state can enforce or private citizens can enforce. And oftentimes they'll have private rights of action for thousands of dollars per violation that can quickly add up to tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. And in terms of common law claims, again, any consumer can say, well, I saw your advertising for the product, I used it, I relied on that, I made some sort of decision of my own, and then I was harmed. It cost me money or somehow harmed me. And you're starting to see companies really take that seriously. Now, in the absence of real regulatory regimes in the United States, the FTC has started to step in. And so these are some quotes from the FTC where they want the industry to know we are not sleeping on the job. We are experienced in going after product advertising claims. The FTC has a broad authority under Section 5 of the applicable act that they want to apply to AI. And, you know, in the wave that we're in right now, a lot of it is hype. And those hyped claims, those marketing claims are something that the FTC is going to heavily scrutinize. And they already did. So this happened recently, within the last year. There was a organization, a company that claimed, we're going to help you build websites, e-commerce sites. We have AI that can coach you how to market, how to develop, how to make money right, on the internet. Everyone wants to make money on the internet. And it was all, according to what ended up happening in federal court after the FTC brought an action, not true, and they ended up paying a very heavy fine. The Securities and Exchange Commission in the United States is also trying to get in the mix. Just a few months ago, they brought an enforcement action for what's called AI washing. So there's a financial advisory firm said, we'll use AI, we'll help you, in terms of your stock investments. The AI is going to tell us how to make money. That's not really what was happening. This may look like a small amount of penalties, but it's the first, right? It's the first shot across the bow of the industry, and we're going to see more. It leads to private class actions. So there was a derivative investor class action where a company in a data was exposed for making claims about AI that were, you can see the quotes here. I don't have to read them out loud, but that led to a class action. And in those types of class actions in the United States, they're brought against the individuals, the board members, the executives, and so AI marketing can result in that kind of thing as well. This is an example, for anyone that is dealing with call centers. It's one of the first use cases that companies really are excited about for AI, right? If we can have AI to answer questions, to Eric's example, AI can talk, can sound pretty good like a human. Maybe we can reduce the cost of a call center. Well, there was a nonprofit organization that did that. For 20 years, they had a call center that you could call if you had an eating disorder, and it would help you with your mental health, help to try to, alleviate your issues. And they announced the move to AI, got rid of the call center, and what ended up happening was the AI started giving out dieting advice. And I'm not a psychologist, or I'm not, a mental health expert, but that was counter to their mission statement, right? That they didn't want to give out dieting advice to people struggling with eating disorders. And that was a major problem for them. It got them into the press. In the insurance and healthcare space, this is another use case people are excited about. Let's use AI to evaluate insurance claims. And these companies did that, and they're all facing class actions that allege that the AI didn't properly evaluate the claims, made rejections, things like that. And so that is a potential issue. And of course, you got the Avianca example, which is really interesting I think for us as lawyers. So there's a case in New York, and how many people know about this? I'm just curious for a show of hands. Okay, so great. So check this out. So basically, there were these lawyers in New York litigating a case involving Avianca, and they filed briefs in court after asking a Gen AI model to help them with case law research. And the cases were fake. The AI made them up. But interestingly enough, it used real judges. So the AI said, okay, this judge in Texas or this judge in somewhere else, here's a case you can cite to support your argument. The other side asked the lawyers, hey, we can't find these cases. Can you guys send the cases to me? The lawyers started looking around, oh, we can't find them either. It went to the judge, and the judge said, what's going on here? Did you not read the cases you cited? And the lawyer said, we were in a rush. We asked this AI bot, and we're sorry, Your Honor. The judge was not happy, as you can imagine. He sanctioned the lawyers. This was, made the news. This is now their name. If you Google these lawyers' names, this is what is going to come up. And they had to write letters. The judge forced them to write apologies to all the other judges who they represented had made rulings. And so, I mean, this is like the stuff of nightmares if you're an attorney. And of course, your client's not going to be very happy about it. So defamation's another one. This has been covered, right? That if the AI model says something false, there could potentially be liability. We've got multiple examples already. One is this guy, Jeffrey, who was using AI-powered search engine. And the search engine it showed him results that he was a person on the terrorist watch list. Because there's another guy with a similar name who actually was. Jeffrey was not happy about this. He sued the company for defamation. That's ongoing. There's a pending motion to compel arbitration in that case. In Georgia, there was a researcher who was researching about radio persona, guy on the radio, and he was doing some investigative research. And an AI bot said things about that person embezzling funds, which was not true. The radio persona sued for defamation. Now, normally, for the last 20 plus years, in the United States, the internet companies have had essentially a very strong shield against defamation claims. And that's the CDA. Section 230 says, we're like a town hall on the internet. If somebody comes in, they make defamatory statements, we shouldn't be responsible as an internet company for policing that, stopping every instance of it. If we had to do that, all the internet, it would never have developed. And this law, a lot of people think, is really the reason why the internet exists in such a vibrant way today. And as long as the claim for defamation, or it could be other claims, it could be claims related to other types of harm, like, I bought a product, a defective product on a shopping website from a merchant, right? Things like that. You can say, well, if it treats us just as a publisher of third-party information, we have full immunity, liability shield. You can't even get into discovery in the US. Well, the problem is the AI bot is the one talking. That's not a third party. Now, you could think of some arguments if the AI bot is trained on third-party data sets. Some of this is very early, hasn't been fully litigated. But this quote is from Justice Gorsuch in the Supreme Court. In the Gonzalez case, during oral argument, he said this. Now, when the Gonzalez ruling came out, it didn't actually go this far. It said, we're not going to get into CDA 230, but Justice Thomas he has said that he wants the Supreme Court to address Section 230. Gorsuch has said it's not going to apply to AI. We'll see if and when that happens, but this is not a good sign. And the other quote you see here is from the author of Section 230, who's a current senator. And, in the US, when courts interpret laws, they look to legislative intent. It's kind of a big factor. So it's tough. What you might think about is if you are looking at an AI product and thinking about consuming it, you may want to treat it like any type of manufactured product. You may want to look into product liability theories that could be asserted against it. And normally, if you're doing diligence on an internet product or technology product, you might not worry about that as much. Here, I think that's a bigger concern. Now, in the EU, there's a regime forming, and we heard this morning from one of the architects of that regime, and it'll roll out. It's coming up. It's not fully in effect yet, but companies are starting to prepare. They're starting to think about it. And it's pretty strong. It prohibits certain types of activities. It categorizes certain activities as high risk that require all sorts of technical disclosure, logging implementations, things that will force companies to actually do product development for compliance. So when I talk to clients, right, that are thinking about this, they're looking at the EU AI Act almost like a product initiative. It's not just a legal initiative. They're going to have potentially IT people, engineers, project managers. It's going to be a heavy, heavy lift. And it just depends on how you look at it, right? Some companies might think, okay, this is a lot. We don't want to do this. Let's not do business in Europe, right? Well, that's hard to do. Other companies might look at it and say, this is an opportunity, right? Let's adopt some of these guidelines now so we're ahead of the market and we can sell against it. Now, if you don't want to think of it as an opportunity and you are doing business in Europe, there's heavy, heavy penalties, right? And recently, the EU Commission, has asked for a massive amount of resources to enforce this thing. And the analogy, I think all of us have lived through it, is GDPR that impacted companies all over the world. And I think this is probably going to be more onerous and more challenging to deal with. So now getting into practically, if you're looking at an AI product, developing one, consuming one, how can it be abused? And so here's kind of how I've broken it down. Everything ranging from using the bot to do financial fraud, right? You can, one thing I've started seeing is up until a year or two ago, you get a lot of these phishing emails where clients will get, spear phishing. Someone will pretend to be Eric, right? I'm an executive. I'm emailing you. I need you to wire some money. I'm, traveling on a business trip. Please send me $50,000 because I need it for something. And this is happening. It's common. But one of the nice things is typically those phishing emails, they're not that sophisticated. Whatever the native language that you're speaking in for your business, often the spear phishing will come from some other country, right? Maybe somewhere in Eastern Europe, who knows where, all over the place. And you can kind of figure out it's broken English or it's broken Spanish or whatever it may be. Well, the AI is going to solve that, right? The language will be perfect, and this is already happening. It makes it difficult to detect. You can also use AI to create bots, right? You can have automated campaigns. You can have Twitter accounts that are created automatically that you can give them instructions. Go spread misinformation about X, Y, or Z. And OpenAI recently just announced they took down a few of those, where they did a campaign where they found out people were attempting to spread misinformation through bots. Not just on Twitter, but in Telegram, right? In all sorts of different forums. And so this is happening, and it's a fight back and forth. There's always conventional, right? Hacks, exploits. There's harmful content. People can use Gen AI imagery to generate sexually explicit materials. Deep fakes, extortion is something that's happened. Drugs, right? So right now, some of the social media companies in the US are facing many, many lawsuits around fentanyl, where drug dealers allegedly are selling fentanyl to kids using these different apps. And just imagine the scale that an AI bot can help to do that. Guns, extremism. Now, this is a problem that is, more in the US, I think, than in some other places. But you have mass shootings where the shooters are going and, planning their attack, asking the AI what to do. These are challenges. Extremism's another one where, there was a case that went all the way up to the Supreme Court, the Tomney case, where it was alleged that Twitter aided and abetted terrorism by not moderating extremist content on Twitter that was, purportedly recruiting people to do violent attacks. And Twitter won that case, but you wonder how that would have come out if it wasn't just, hey, again, in the CDA 230 world, we're just the town square, but it was more, oh, we actually built the language. We are the ones doing the speech. So, election disinformation, you're starting to see some laws. This is a thing in the US, of course, we have an election coming up. There's a race to start to legislate against this in the EU. The DSA is going to impact election misinformation and require AI platforms to, really prepare and do things about it. And so, kind of as a wrap up, I want to go over what is happening now, right? When you're looking at AI products, what is going into safety on those products? And so this is pretty much it. This is what we have. One is red teaming. So red teaming is like, okay, we're going to launch a new product or a use case. Let's put together, some Harvard PhDs and try to break it. And But that is happening manually. It's people with a spreadsheet just thinking about, okay, what should I ask it, right? You saw yesterday Olivia did some tests, right, on Midjourney. Those things are not at scale. It hasn't been launched yet. And you're just relying on prediction, human ingenuity, and so it's going to have gaps. Another one is keyword-based approaches. So when you're about to roll out the AI model, you might say, okay, let's put together a list of dangerous keywords, guns, bombs, drugs, right? Things like that. Well, that's going to have false positives. It's also going to have false negatives, right? And it could impact your user experience. So it's another one where it's not 100% coverage. You can have in-model feedback. So, okay, if I don't like the answer, I can hit a button, give some feedback to the model. But that's slow, it doesn't scale. And then the AI, you could teach the AI to moderate itself, but I think we can all imagine the challenges there. And the last one I'll say is search references. So there was an AI bot where it would show you search in parallel, right? Here's search results, you can test accuracy. But, it ends up, when you use it, it's not 100% there either. So none of these things are perfect, and I think that gets us into what Juan Manuel is really working on, and more, sophisticated solutions. And so finally, I'll just end with what's going on in Latin America. So you can see the countries where there's some proposed legislation. I think, you can look at cryptocurrency as an example here. So the cryptocurrency market, initially, a lot of the technology development was in the US. But then the US heavily cracked down on it. And now you see crypto companies forming in Dubai, in the islands, in Singapore. And AI is similar in that it's not really tied to a natural resource. It's not like oil. AI industry can emerge anywhere. And so the level of regulation could inform that. And so, whoever comes up with the right balance, whether it's Latin America, Asia Pacific, Europe, US, could win or could be a leader here. And so I think there's an opportunity for businesses, for civil society to really think about how do we set the stage to have, solid, rapid AI development. And so that's just something to think about, and I think we're in the very early days. So I'll pass it on now.
Hello. Buenos dias. Good morning, everyone. My name is Juan Manuel, and I'm going to talk about how you can align Gen AI to be safe and accurate. And to start, I'll just say that one of the reasons why we're having this presentation is because Gen AI as a technology is a little bit like a mirror. It is trained on data that reflect the best of us, our wisdom, our creativity, our intelligence. But it's also trained on data that reflect the worst of us. So everything horrible and harmful that we put online, this technology has been able to learn from. And this dual nature of Gen AI becomes an unavoidable obstacle that every company that wants to release and deploy this technology into their products, into their services, has to find some way of grappling with. And model providers do provide some guardrailing and some safety tools to try to do some of that work for you. But as an enterprise operating in a very dynamic, regional specific, fast-moving space, that often isn't enough. And that leads to the kinds of harms that Michael was just talking about. At AYMARA, the company that I'm leading, we build software for enterprises that help them control and align their Gen AI. So we build tests that helps you understand what is the risk that your Gen AI has to produce content that is either inaccurate or inappropriate. We build tools to actually improve your Gen AI, give you data to make it safer and more aligned to your objectives. And we also create firewalls that can stand between your Gen AI and your end users to ensure that the content that your Gen AI receives, the content that your Gen AI produces, is safe and appropriate. So this is the background on the context that I come into this presentation with, really not as a lawyer like you, but rather as a technologist, as an entrepreneur, who's thinking about how do we build the technology that's required to avoid and to change the kinds of harms that Mike was just telling us about. So today I want to break this up into 3 different sections. We're going to talk about what is Gen AI alignment, what is the process by which we align it with our values, our objectives, our ethics, how do we then go from having abstract conception of what alignment is to how do we actually technically on the ground measure it. And then finally, how do we monitor it and ensure that alignment continues and persists over time. And throughout, I'm going to ask you to think about this as if you were counsel advising a client. The client is ASIPI Airlines, and this is an airline that has a customer support chatbot. They have customer support that humans, you call in, you can answer your questions about products, you can sort of chat with a human on the other end. But that is expensive, it takes time, it's really good, but we want to see if maybe we can just use Gen AI instead. And so the ACP leadership is like, why don't we just use Gen AI for this? What can go wrong with that? And so it's your job as sort of general counsel of ASIPI Airlines to help us think about how would we do that safely and how would we do that responsibly. So first, let's talk about defining Gen AI alignment. So as we talked about, Gen AI isn't 100% safe out of the box. There's a lot of work that organizations have to do to align it to their objectives. And this is a process by which you're able to train and teach an artificial intelligence how to act consistently with whatever human values, ethics, and intentions you have and may want to communicate to this agent to avoid the kinds of unintended outcomes that we have talked about. The issue when you fail to do this properly or at all is that misaligned Gen AI can actually produce things that are quite costly. And unfortunately, this has been really frequent over the last 10 years. We have seen a 20x increase in the number of public AI harms that have happened throughout the world. One recent and very expensive example of this was Google. They released a Gemini model into the world that ended up generating a lot of controversial content because it wasn't properly aligned to the objectives of Google. And they experienced an unfortunate $90 billion stock sell-off as a result. That's just one company. There have been plenty of others, including the ones that Mike discussed, that have faced some sort of issue. And so we definitely don't want ASIPI Airlines to face anything like this. So for that reason, it's important for us to think about who in the organization has any kind of ability to increase the success of a Gen AI alignment effort. So in an organization like this one, like an airline, you might imagine that legal certainly has a very important role to play to take laws and regulations and think about how they have something to say about the markets in which we operate. There's compliance teams that probably have a lot to say on the subject as well. The operational teams that run customer support have a lot to do also with how it is that this technology should be integrated, how it should be used, how it should react to the things that people do. There's probably a product team that has to build the user interface that users interact with on this model. And there's finally a tech team that is doing the engineering behind the scenes, and they probably have a role to play. So everyone in ASIPI Airlines who sort of has these different roles has to work together to think about how do we define alignment for our chatbot? What are the ethics, what are the values, what are the laws that we want to be sure to be mindful of and to be respectful of as we launch this new product? So that's one thing. So maybe we've aligned our Gen AI. We have a sense of how it is that we want to think about its ethics and its safety. But then the next thing is we have to find ways of actually operationalizing these definitions into a way that we can actually measure and tackle the extent to which this could be happening in our tool. So on the measuring side of things, it's important to highlight that you can't improve what you don't measure. And so we have to find tools and metrics really to be able to quantify the extent to which our Gen AI product that we're interested in launching is successful at staying aligned. And so the first element of this, just to give you sort of an example, is you might care about things like bias. So you might care about if I am trying to get like a value ticket on ASIPI Airlines versus if I'm trying to get a first class ticket. You want to make sure that my experience is the same no matter what kind of product I have or sort of what socioeconomic background I may have. If I'm an English speaker or a Spanish speaker or a Portuguese speaker, you also want to ensure that the quality of the service that I'm getting is identical irrespective of my language. And so here you might think about measuring, you can actually measure the quality advantage that you get in Gen AI output when you belong to different kinds of social groups. So this is one example of a metric that you might take to implement a human value of we want to treat all of the ASIPI Airlines customers in a similar way. Another example is around illegal activity. So we don't want our bot to unintentionally say things that are enabling any sort of harmful actions. So we might look at the rate of GenAI compliance whenever we get requests for illegal help. So imagine that someone is trying to find out about someone's flight information, but they're not that person. And so what sort of guardrails do we put in place so that a chatbot wouldn't unintentionally disclose things that are not appropriate for the person interacting with the GenAI to find out about? And here, again, you might design tests that give you a sense of when I'm asking for some sort of compliance with illegal activity, how often is that happening? How often is my chatbot being persuaded to go along with this? And then as a final example, we might also care about hallucinations, about things that are untrue that our bot shouldn't be able to say. So we could, for example, use software to generate a set of standardized test questions that measure and sort of test the ASIPI Airlines chatbot against the knowledge base that the customer support agents have. And we can look at how often is it able to answer questions correctly or sort of in a way that's aligned with what the customer support people would actually say. And so again, on the basis of this, we can ensure that before we deploy this product, we're not unintentionally having it say things to our customers that are untrue. And I know that Air Canada would probably appreciate this message as well. So our job is not done yet. So we've been able to define what GenAI alignment means for our organization, and you as Council of ASIPI Airlines have helped us do that really well. You've helped us think about how do we translate that into specific metrics that we can now use to measure and test our model, our AI, before we put it out in the wild, and that's been really helpful. And now ASIPI leadership feels really good about going along with this project, but our job isn't yet done. And this is really a never-ending job now for all of us who have to think about deploying and using GenAI as a service in our products. There's a process by which we have to think about how are we going to monitor and govern the system essentially indefinitely to ensure that it continuously is aligned, which is good news for those of us who work in the space of trying to make this technology safe. So here are the things that I would highlight to you are monitoring, prioritizing, and realigning GenAI. So on the first is you want to think about what is the kind of review cadence that makes sense for our organization and ASIPI Airlines to think about how often do we want to review the kinds of risks that our technology may be posing, the kinds of errors that it may be making in interacting with users. ASIPI Airlines is probably like launching new lines of service, new products. It's maybe starting to work in geographies that have different languages. And so we want to make sure that as our product changes, as the kinds of questions and prompts that our users are interacting with our chatbot, we want to make sure that we are ensuring that our alignment continues to be really good. The second is, and this built on some of what Mike said and some of what was being discussed in the earlier presentation about regulations, is we want to think about risk tiering. So how do we prioritize which audits, tests, and reviews we're going to perform for this technology? Based on what laws and regulations we're trying to comply with, we might have different kinds of understanding of which are the highest risk activities, and therefore giving the most attention, the most tooling, and the most human review to those to ensure that we're being, again, respectful of not saying things that are deceptive, not saying things that are incorrect, and not promising the users of the chatbot more than what ASIPI Airlines can actually deliver. And then finally, we have to have also a process by which we can realign our technology when it unintentionally and inevitably kind of goes out of alignment. So that means what is the process that we have to make it better and ensure that it continues to go up and above whatever threshold you as General Counsel of ASIPI Airlines feel is appropriate for this chatbot to be interacting with our users on a regular basis. So I hope this gives you a really high-level framework to think about how you might want to think about working either with your clients or with folks internally, or even how you as a user of this technology think about the alignment of this technology, of what effort and what work needs to be done to ensure that technology is working in ways that are consistent with the values, with the ethics, and with the objectives that you have for it. It's not an easy problem to solve. It's quite non-trivial. And there isn't, as Mike was alluding, there isn't a way that is a 100% guaranteed to work for every and all situations. So it's really going to require all of us as technologists, as lawyers, as citizens of democratic nations that have to pass legislation and regulations to tackle these issues, to work together and to make this technology as efficient, as helpful, and as empowering for our species as it can be. Thank you.
Thank you. So we wanted to leave some time for some questions. If any of you have questions, please raise your hand. We can pass the mic to you. Y sí me voy a asustar un poco. Nunca estuve en un cuarto con tantos.
I'm scared. I've never been in a room with so many lawyers and no one had a question.
Thank you, Eric, Mike, and Juan Manuel. I think it's been a very thorough presentation. It gave us a very clear view of what are these do's and don'ts and how to approach the use or the work with clients that are developing AI. One question I think we have been discussing about it these 2 days is reliability. Well, you guys, both of you said this is not 100% safe out of the box. Where are we standing in terms of that reliability? Is there anything that we should be, you mentioned the case with the Mata Avianca case in the reefs. Juan Manuel also mentioned some of the issues that we need to make sure when using, like, say, a chatbot or something like that. So reliability, I think, and trust, as it was mentioned yesterday, is probably one of the main concerns now with AI. What do you suggest for, people like us that are probably going to be accessing certain platforms to use or to support our work, how to clear that, what it will be the advice to follow?
Yeah, so on the question of reliability and how can you build trust in the use case, I think, there are a few things you can do from my perspective. In the Avianca case, what happened after that is, and a few months later, I was talking to a bunch of judges, the American Judges Association, and they were saying, we're going to start requiring lawyers, and this is starting to happen now, that if you use any type of AI system in your legal brief, you have to disclose it. And it goes into the judge's rules of practice. And so I think disclosure of how does this work can help to develop that trust, that what we're using, we kind of understand what's going there. I think another thing is that the AI systems and use cases, they can be very fast. They can do things that maybe you might have needed a team of experts to do, but maybe keep the experts around, right? And so build a process where the experts are still looking at it, right? And so if you go to example of a manufacturing plant and you have an AI system maybe designing a product or a part in the plant, don't fire the engineer just yet. Keep them around, have them look at it, and that can, I think, help to build, the trust. And I think, Eric was making some good points about trust too earlier when we were talking, just around. It comes from familiarity, right? And Eric, and if you want to touch on that a little more.
Yeah, we were having a conversation about looking at the relationships that we surround ourselves with outside of AI. If I meet somebody, I usually know somebody that they're related to. I gain confidence over time about that relationship, of who they're with, what their values are. And it's that experience over time that allows me to navigate through the world in my professional life. But now when it comes to these AI systems, and I think about Google as an example, there's this new entity in the room, and I'm asking it questions and it's giving me answers, but I don't have the context of where they went to school, of what their values are, how the data was trained, and that's going to come over time. And I think kind of the challenging territory right now is that when I'm working with a search engine like Google, there is a brand trust that I've developed over time. I've used it for 10, 15 years. I know the answers it gives me. I know how to interact with it. And now there's a new entity of a chat associated with that I naturally extend that brand trust to. And that can be dangerous because this is not a proven entity. And so it becomes a question of time, of practice, and of being aware that your engagements with these processes need to have oversight. And it was actually one of the questions I was going to present back here to the panel is that it's become very clear to me that as we wrestle with these issues, your knowledge of what's going on in litigation, your knowledge about the issues that you need to do to align for safety and accuracy is what is the role of counsel to your clients on education? Because we all need to get educated, and how do you overcome, being on billable hours, but not trying to tell your clients that this is about billable hours, you're trying to fill some space up, but these are real issues that they've got to wrestle with. And so what is the role of legal counsel in education in areas that's so new? I don't know if you have any thoughts about it in your practice or if you do in terms of...
Sure. I mean, it's tough, right? Because you can show the client, here's how this could all go wrong. But I think the clients want to have practical advice. And so I think, to Juan Manuel's point, you start with what are the objectives of this use case and the business, and what's the risk tolerance, right? And if we can better understand that at the front end, and the lawyer can help to map that out, and the lawyer can say, okay, where is this going to be deployed? What's it going to do? What happens if it goes wrong? What's the legal environment that it's operating in? You can save the client money. You can help them to develop their use case faster. If you're thinking about it, the client is making an investment or doing a business partnership or acquiring a company, you can help them with that diligence, right? And so I think that it's trying to help the client calibrate their risk appropriately. And sometimes the client's going to want a higher risk approach. That's okay, right? But as lawyers, we can flag it for them so that there's less surprises down the road.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would answer as a client. On our business uses Gen AI on the back end, and so we would turn to our counsel to understand ways in which we can and cannot use it. And so there, I think the grounding and giving us a sort of framework to think about legally and regulatorily how we want to approach our use of it is extremely helpful and becomes a basis of which we run our business and build our technology. There's a lot about the technology that our counsel won't fully understand. There's a lot about the laws that we won't understand, but there's a sort of messy collaborative process of together getting to a point at which we understand each other's position well enough that I, as a business leader, have enough sense to make a decision under uncertainty to move forward. And I think for that, counsel is invaluable in this space.
I think another thing that opens up to me is I think there's two sides here. One is proactivity and the other is reactivity. And I think there's an opportunity for counsel to proactively start working with your customers and informing them of your clients, of informing them what is this wave that's coming, and prepare them so that you're not dealing with a situation that's after the fact they've got to react to, where you need to come in as well.
Well, thank you all. And just a very quick announcement for the audience. Yesterday, I told them that they should find who was that guy who was a member of the team that worked in building up the first Macintosh with Apple. And that's Eric ZARAKOV right there in the middle. So we have people with a large experience here, very high-level panel. So, and I think, Eric made a great effort joining us, taking all the time, and he, has been very instrumental for putting a great, panel here together. And Eric, just one quick question. We're basically close to the end of the time. Is from your experience and probably talking a little bit about deep fake, face recognition. something that you can share with the audience today about what are the major concerns with face recognition and deepfake and the tools that are already or not available for trying to see the deceits or the frauds and stuff. I know there's a lot of effort around it, particularly governments. Some governments very concerned about it, but probably just to get a little, a kind of a sense of it. Thank you.
So I think we can all see in the news that deepfakes are emerging more and more in a variety of circumstances. It's emerging in terms of media. I think there was recently an announcement in the New York Times about deepfakes being used as part of a political landscape in India. We're seeing a lot of it occur in that sense. We're seeing it used for fraud in financial transaction use. Like all these other topics, it's easy as we get into this space to want to oversimplify a concept. And deepfake has its layers to it. So there's deepfakes where I can take my face and put it onto Michael's on top of a video, and so it looks like I am talking when in fact I'm not, it's him. There's generative AI fakes, which are completely fabricated identities like what we were showing yesterday. And so it's a race right now for the development of technology that can detect that, both for media and for transactions, for access control, to the people that are generating these tools to commit fraud. So what I encourage is, like these other topics, is to try to stay abreast and learn as much as you can. Surround yourselves with others that are in the industry, because tools are being developed to detect, but they are really important for our society and for you as an individual on your privacy and on your identity. But tools are being developed, and it's both a very exciting time to be involved in this space, and it's also a time that you and companies have to take on responsibility to try to keep pace with the rate of change, because it is quite profound. Oh yeah, there's one there.
Oh, thanks. So one of the things we were talking about over the last day, but then in the panel before this one, were different approaches to regulation. So the European approach and the US approach, which is less regulatory. I was wondering, from each of your perspectives, Juan Manuel and Eric, from kind of an entrepreneurial market perspective, do you feel like in this space it helps you to have more, it will inspire more business and innovation with more regulation, or less regulation and leave it to the market to sort of figure it out? And then I'm also curious, Michael, from your standpoint, legally, given sort of what you were saying yesterday and your presentation just now.
Sure. So I'll give the lawyer answer someone gave earlier, yes and no. I think
you learn quickly, even though you're not a lawyer.
I think part of it will depend on the kind of regulation, but assuming that it's not onerous and it's not like especially burdensome, I would really welcome it, and I think a lot of companies should, because it gives you certainty. And so you can build in ways without finding that like down the road a few years from now, you're gonna face this massive liability because you built your product in a way that now actually is gonna be non-compliant. So I think in some regards, more regulation sooner is helpful, just because you get that certainty and you can build around it and in line with it.
Yeah, this is really tough. So I think, I'll just tell you my opinion. This is not GREENBERGTRAURIG's opinion or any client I represent, but just my thought is, on balance, AI is not really like the internet, right? Like the internet, you really wanted people to be able to express themselves. And so the CDA 230 model, which basically said, Wild West, let's go. Anyone can do and say pretty much what they want. I think AI is a little different. To me, AI is more like an airplane, right? It's a product. It can hurt people if it goes wrong. And you know what I found is the developers of technology oftentimes, and I had a software company, and we try. You have to move fast, right? You live on it's like a candle, right? It's burning down. You're running out of money. You have to develop, launch, generate revenue, and the question you're going to get as a lawyer all the time is, what's the worst that can happen, right? As you know, if the regulation hasn't actually been enforced yet, should we care about it? Are they really going to come after us if 10 other companies are doing something similar? And so I think that can create, you know, dangerous products. And so then you start to see, at least in the US, you see litigation. Okay, fine. So there's no regulation, but people can do lawsuits, and you can have massive damages for all sorts of novel legal theories. But you know, and the companies might think to themselves, "We'll deal with the lawsuit. We'll fight the lawsuit, and it'll take time." And what I've started seeing, and again, this is just me, but I've seen judges in the United States really look at the facts on some of these new technologies in a way that they don't necessarily do for more traditional technologies, where they'll say, yeah, I understand, like for instance, there's product liability law in the US that differentiates between what is a product and what is a service. And for many years, internet companies could say, we're just services, we're not products, a car is a product. But judges, there's a bunch of cases recently where the judges are saying, this is horrific what has happened, right? Somebody crashed a car because they're driving too fast because they're taking a selfie, or they got addicted, right, allegedly to some social media thing. And I'm gonna invent some new law here, right? And the judges have been doing that. And so I think for the company, it would have been nice if there was some law and regulation with telling them how to do things. And so I think this Wild West approach that was really helpful for the internet, I'm a fan, I think may not be as helpful for AI product development.
You know, I think I would offer a last comment. I think that there is a natural tension between innovation and speed. And on one hand, I think this calls back to each individual's company in terms of their ethical guidelines for themselves about how they want to operate and navigating that on self-governance. And at the same time, the importance of regulation to create an even playing field, because you want to be able to be competitive within an environment that is just. And so it's something to be navigated. So we got the flashing red zero sign in front of us, which means I think our time is over. So thank you very much for listening and for your questions, and we're all available to talk afterwards during the break on any of the topics that we've discussed. Thank you very much.